I would like to congratulate you, Prof. Miguel, for the increasing in the impact factor of the computers and education.
Yeah, it's now number 2 out of 267 journals.
Yeah.
The second best journal. So we have done some good job.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yes.
But still the review process is very strict.
It's stricter every time because so many people submit to the journal. So many people submit to the journal.
Yeah,
The desk reject is around 65% desk reject. So, and the chances to get a paper there is around 5%.
I managed to publish only once in 2018. After that, I think I submitted 5 or 6. Here we have Dr. Ibrahim Arpachi and Dr. Mohammed Sharafi. We submitted around like 3, 4 in the past few years, but unfortunately we are receiving desk rejection.
Desk rejection.
Desk rejection, yeah.
So now we have a second journal, which is the Computer Education Open, which is still not indexed. We hope to have it indexed by the end of the year. So there's another chance, but it's still not in.
But this is still a junior journal. We are looking for the grandfather. Yeah.
It's not so easy.
We are noticing that every year with the increasing number of the impact factor for many journals, not only computers and education. It's really challenging.
Yeah, because a lot of people are now working in this area, and it's increasing because computers are everywhere. And in education, more than before, after COVID.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
When do we start? It's 8:14.
Yeah, that's.
Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome Prof. Miguel Nussbaum, our second keynote speaker. Prof. Miguel is a full professor of computer science at the School of Engineering of the Universidad Catolica de Chile and is its department head. In 2004, he won the Innovation in Education Prize of the Organization of American States. And in 2011, he won the Innovation and Education Prize of Chile for his work in education. And in 2018, he won the Universidad Andrés Bello, Chile Award in Education. He was a member of the board of the Chilean Agency for the Quality of Education and is currently the co-editor of the Computers and Education and a fellow of the International Society of Learning Sciences. He has 2 MOOCs in Spanish in Coursera on the constructivist classroom and on the 4 C's: communication, critical thinking, collaboration, and creativity. His pedagogical methodology supported by collaborative technology for transforming the classroom experience have been used in schools in Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Brazil, Guatemala, India, England, Sweden, USA, Uruguay, and UK, were endorsed by the UNESCO and supported by the Chilean government. Bradesco Foundation, Brazil, Microsoft, HP, Intel, Plan Cibol, Uruguay, and the Inter-American Development Bank. His current interest is in deploying the 21st century skills, specifically the four C's plus connection grit, both at the school and university level. His keynote speech entitled High Order Thinking Skills, Today's Need. Prof. Miguel, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm honored to be here. It's the first time that I give a talk in the Arab world, and really, I'm very proud of it. Let me start. There are two sides of the story, and I would like to start with one of these. So let me show you a video that takes around 2-3 minutes.
You need just to share your screen.
You don't have the audio?
We have the audio, but we don't have the video. Just share your screen and then.
So you don't have the video. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Let me start again. I didn't share the screen. You are right. You are now sharing the screen?
Yes.
Yes. So let me start the video again. Wait. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's the question. Will our children be ready? That's the big question. Now let's look to another side of the story. What do we teach? It's interesting to see that in the late 50s, the Russians beat the Americans launching the Sputnik. And in the US, there was then a focus on STEM that was followed throughout the world. Now, STEM, of course, allowed us to reach the status where we are, which was depicted in the movie. However, STEM did not really allow that all this wealth could be shared equally through society. And this difference in income is now being increased day by day, and we see the social unrest everywhere. The second dimension that we have to look to is that this technology is pushing us to a virtual way. Facebook has changed to Meta, bidding that everything will now be in the virtual world, including teaching and learning. However, what we have to understand that the teaching and learning that occurs in the virtual world is in the rational dimension. That means in the expert knowledge. That means contents that allow us really to deliver new technologies and use new technologies. However, learning is much more than teaching rationality. That means that the social and emotional dimensions occur mainly face-to-face, and this cannot be taught through the virtual way, through the virtual world. And that's something that has been shown through the years through COVID, because the biggest problem we have now is the social and emotional dimension that has not been really developed to our students through these last 2-3 years. The third element is the use of games. Game-based education is, of course, very engaging, it's student-centered, and kids enjoy it a lot. And today, games are everywhere, since we have learned to use them so that kids, and not only kids, university students get engaged in their learning. However, the World Health Organization 3 years ago determined that they are very addictive and consider them a disease. So when we use games for teaching, basically what we're doing, we are putting them in an addictive path. So it's not so clear that we should really use games for teaching. Now, all this technological drive has put us in a very biased world. The social network is extremely biased. And what we have now in front of us is a graph which was studied by University of Washington a couple of years ago, where you see the tweets of different type of people. This is in the US, the political left, the political right, and within the political right, the pro-Trump. And what you can see that the people tweet just within them, and they don't look to different viewpoints. This is especially true in the pro-Trumps that really have no connection with the political left, and the political left, no connection, with the Trump people. And this comes to a very biased world that you can see everywhere, where my viewpoint is the absolute truth. Now, 2 years ago, a set of 150 intellectuals wrote a letter at the Harper's Magazine where they said the democratic inclusion we want can be achieved only if we speak out against the intolerant climate that is set in all sides. So the point is, how can we now include in our teaching this inclusion, this viewpoint of others, to be much more tolerant? If not, what will happen is much more worse, much more social internal problems within society. So from my point of view and the experience of all these years of reading thousands of papers as editor of computer science education, is that the focus should not be on how we teach, and we should now really focus on what we teach. Now, when we talk about what we teach, the first thing that have to be considered and addressed is languages. What are languages? Of course, natural languages as the one that come to our mind immediately, and I show you here the Rosetta Stone, which is one of the first dictionaries of 3 ancient languages, is the way that human beings developed to a more abstract construction of the world. And what allows languages is to describe the world that surrounds us in abstract terms so that we construct elements that allow us to view and transfer this knowledge to other people and construct new knowledge. Now, languages evolve, and one of key languages to develop science is math. Here you have the Maxwell equations, and of course, people that don't have advanced mathematics behind cannot read these equations. This is just a language which is completely out of their sight. They cannot understand it. Another language is music. People that don't read music, it's the same for them as the math. And music, the written music, allow us to express not only emotions, but also the way we understand our communication with others. And then came the language, very specific languages, for example, medicine. Here you have an electroencephalograph, and for us, these are just whatever, but for an expert medical doctor, he really can understand what's happening inside our brain and see if we have an illness. But for other people, this is just nothing. It doesn't mean anything. So if you understand the adequate language, you can really understand domains which are very specific and allow us to see what others cannot see. And this is depicted in this slide, where you see a person in front of his music system, and he understands the electronics behind and can really comprehend what's happening and why the music is of such good quality. If he hasn't the language of electronics, this is just magic. The same as the previous ones. How can you really understand what's happening inside your brain through a machine? How can you build music if you don't have the language? How can you understand physics if you don't have the language? Everything is magic. So the point is, if we will really develop in our kids the understanding of the world, the first thing that we have to see is what languages we should give them. And for me, it's very important to understand this, how we use languages. Today, when we teach math, we are very focused in the operalization of the math more than in the modeling and using of the math. Languages should be used. And when we have tools like computers that allow us to operationalize in an automatic way, we shouldn't focus on that. We should focus on how we use these languages so that the world is not magic and we can understand and operate in this world. So once we have the languages to understand the surroundings around us, what skills do we need? And here we go through the critical thinking and where the first thing that we have to mention is the basic recall of information. Here I have an experience of myself of a delivery of a supermarket where you can see that the bags are all numbered 6 to 3, 5 to 3, 5 to 3, 5 to 3, but one case was number 712. So this is a basic recall problem. The person that brought me all these bags and cases didn't make a real adequate recall. This is just a problem of recall. And how do we teach recall? Making really sense of what recall is and that people understand the importance. And here you have a very simple problem of recall. A second dimension is inference. In the movie The Great Hack, which is now 2 years in Netflix, they show how with the data of Facebook, they really drove some people to vote to some candidates that they were pushing to. In this way, Trump came out in the US and the Brexit in UK. And that was using data from Facebook and targeting people that they knew they could really change, pushing them with new data. So here, what we have to teach is how to infer. That means when you have some data, what conclusions and how do you infer your conclusions so that you're not manipulated by third parties. Analysis. This is data of the PISA 2018 examination, where it's indicated that 1 in 10 students are able of distinguishing between a fact and an opinion. That means that only 10% of the students that did the PISA of 2018 knew the difference between a fact and an opinion. That means that they're not able to analyze what they read and understand what is really an opinion of a person and what is a fact. On the other side, in the same examination, they indicate that 1 in 4 students cannot really understand the main idea of a text. So what's the key of a text? Only 25% of the students could understand the main idea of a text. That means that the analysis capacity is extremely limited. Evaluation. What you see here is the Samsung S7 that exploded. You remember, like I would say almost 8 or 10 years ago, Samsung had a huge problem with their phones that exploded. And what happened was that the batteries of these machines were slightly bigger, very, very slightly, like less than a millimeter bigger than what it should have been. So to put them inside the phone, they had to push the battery inside the machine. And when they pushed the battery, they made a slight momentum on the battery. And since the cells are very, very small, some of the cells, of the battery cells, broke. And when they broke, they made a short circuit. And when they have a short circuit, all the current that is possible to go through went through, and that heated the battery. And when the cells reach a given temperature, the battery cells, they exploded. So the problem was that when the batteries came and they were too big, this was not tested accordingly. And they just saw that with a little pressure, they could put the batteries inside, but they didn't measure the consequences of this action. And that had an outcome that cost Samsung several billions of dollars. So evaluation means that we have to understand the consequences of our actions and be able to define the criteria to evaluate this in the most comprehensive fashion. And that has to be taught. Self-regulation is a very good photograph of what self-regulation really means. That is that for a given criteria, that we look to ourselves and see if we're following the criteria that we say ourselves we should be going through. And one way to show that self-regulation is really absent in our culture is sustainability. We talk a lot about climate and about the dirt that we are producing. However, how much do we really do? Are we self-regulated in our behavior with the environment? And the answer is definitely not. So self-regulation is an aspect that also has to be taught so that our children really are accountable of what they're doing with themselves and with their environment and their peers. Metacognition. Metacognition is the ability to understand the cognitive process, the thinking process. How do we think? How do we process the task that we perform? A very nice example is the following one, which is only 1 year old and was informed in The Economist. In 2019, when hackers infiltrated Red Bank, an interbank network connecting Chile's ATM system, they faked a lengthy hiring process, complete with rounds of video interviews, just to fool one victim into downloading and running a Trojan. So what they did is to understand the thinking process of this victim, so to put a Trojan in their machine. So they really did a metacognitive process of this person, and understanding the thinking process of the person, they could do whatever they wanted with them. So metacognition is extremely important so that we can really generalize our thinking and cognitive tasks so that we can transfer this to other domains. For example, here we have a laser. The laser was invented in the 60s, but was a very interesting physical process, but they didn't really understand how this could be used. And different scientists of other domains began to study the laser and transfer their knowledge to what a laser could do. And in this way, in the late 70s, lasers were used for printing, for storing information, and for connecting computers, for transferring data. And in the medical domain, where they started with retinal operation, and today lasers in medicine are extremely important. So here we can see a metacognitive process where they really understood not only what lasers are, but also their specific domain, and could transfer the information from one domain to the other. But this is only possible if we really have the adequate we understand the adequate thinking process. And then we have creativity. Matrix, a movie of the late 90s, where the computers dominate the people and they live in the virtual world and they're slaves of the machines to produce energy. The only difference between machines and computers is the capacity of really generalizing these processes and transferring them to other domains. Creativity can be taught, but for really teaching creativity, we have to understand the thinking processes. And the last one is grit. Grit is the capacity of a child of being involved of what he or she really wants to. If the child is not in the zone of proximal development, not only of the rational domain, but only in the social and the emotional domain, the kid won't be really be able of studying. So what we need is a purpose that energizes the child. And this purpose has to be not only rational in the rational domain, that means something that interests him, but it has also to be socially close. That means that the culture that's behind belongs to this child. And the child has to be emotionally enabled to be able to really being capable of studying this new domain. And the other thing that we have to work through is the perseverance. That means that the child is able to continue in time with this task until the task is really completed. So in this way, through perseverance and a clear purpose, we can drive kids to learn and teach things that we think is impossible. Now, what does it mean to transform the classroom? Today, what we do in classroom is basically looking to Bloom's taxonomy, remembering and understanding the basic skills, leaving the responsibility of the children and the students to the higher end abilities. What we have to think is the other way, that understanding and remembering can be done by themselves, through MOOCs and through different activities, where grit is key, definitely, because when they work by their own, we have to do with the grit dimension in our side. And what the teacher really should do is the high-ended capabilities, where the social and emotional dimensions are key. So what's the role of technology? If the older before is basically pure pedagogy. Technology is a world of resources for learning. Today, everything is inside this machine. So basically, we have to understand that the resources that we have through the internet is something we have to use and teach our kids how to use it. The second is the support of collaboration. At the micro level, that means in small groups, where technology is the enabler of the social dimension. That means that the technology focus the roles of the different participants and allow them to complete their task. And at the macro level, allowing people to collaborate at different dimensions which are not face-to-face. And the last one is to amplify our senses. We today work at every dimension, from the nanometers to the massive distance of the universe. And the different tools that we have developed allow us to work in these different dimensions. So we have to teach our kids to use and understand, if they really need to, this amplifying sense of technology. So to finish and leave some minutes for questions, the focus today is not only on how we learn, but more on what we learn. And let me make a retrospective. In the Middle Ages, what teaching meant was reading the holy writings. And in German, you say Vorlesung, reading before. So basically, Vorlesung is a lecture, reading before. And this maintained in time. So what we are doing is basically a Vorlesung. And when technology came, the idea of this Vorlesung didn't change. And what we're doing today is basically clustering our students now not in front of a teacher, but in front of a machine. But we forget here that what we're teaching is just the rational dimension, but not the social and the emotional dimension. And there's no big difference in a machine and a human being. Human beings are mainly emotional and social. And that's something that today we are forgetting. Thank you very much. And I'm open now to the questions you might have. I don't hear you. Any questions? Mustafa, any remarks?
Yeah, really so inspiring.
Yes, Professor.
I don't know if somebody has a remark or a question about my presentation.
Well,
What?
yes.
Yeah,
I don't have a question, but I have a remark. Just what I understood that a person to actually learn, he needs to read before learning from the instructor, so that he knows what he's learning, and if that he has an ambition to learn what kind of subject or sector he's learning for. That's all.
I would say that learning basically is a three-dimensional process where what we teach, that means math or language, which I define as the rational dimension, is just one of these dimensions. If you look to small children that learn by themselves to speak, which is extremely difficult, you would say they acquire language, the rational dimension, definitely not through the rational dimension. They manage to get it through the emotional dimension, because children are extremely emotional. And what they do, they really connect with the people they are in their surrounding. And they learn also the social dimension. They learn what they can do and cannot do. But the learning mainly occurs in the social dimension, because small children, if they don't like it, begin to cry immediately. So they only learn when they feel that they are close to the teacher. So if the teacher makes an environment that is warm, that is interesting for the kid, they will really learn. But this occurs mainly in the emotional dimension. And in school, we forget completely about the emotional dimension. We understand there's a social dimension, and we understand what we want to teach, the rational dimension. But we forget that human beings are extremely emotional. So
specifically with the emergence of COVID.
Sorry, Mustafa, yes?
I'm saying that specifically with the emergence of COVID.
Yeah, with the emergence of COVID, this was explicit. We learned that the emotional dimension was extremely important. And the kids need really to be with other kids and with other and other students so that they can really deliver and work out their emotions. Yes.
Prof, I have a question. You already discussed in your presentation, like how this could be linked to sustainability. Now, you know that this domain is a hot area of research, and most of the scholars are working on achieving the 17 Sustainability Development Goals. Now, what do you think, like, is it, or how can we link like the use of the machines and that affect the high order thinking and its impact on sustainability? Do you think like there is a link between this when it comes to children?
Well, I related sustainability with self-reflection. And I would say the capacity of understanding that I'm part of a total and look myself in this total allows me to see how my actions are not only relevant for myself, but for the people that are around me. But this self-reflection has to be developed. So from my point of view, sustainability won't be possible to really develop in the way that we can really develop in children a self-reflection. And self-reflection is something that's not talked about in school. And it's extremely important, not only for learning. Self-reflection is important for all our actions with other human beings. And for me, that's a focus of what we should teach.
Do you think that AI technologies enable such self-reflection?
What is AI technology? That's a very interesting question. What we do with AI technology, as we understand it today, is basically trying to put in one system all the experience of all the people. So what you do is you take the data of what people do, what people write, what people think. And from this, you make a system that tries to behave like all these people. But the question is, do we want to
have such a system?
Do we want to behave as what we have done or we are doing? Is this really what we want to do? And my answer is no. And that's what I'm saying. We have to teach to make it differently. And what AI is doing is replicating what we don't want to replicate, because we see that what we're doing is not sustainable, for example. So what the AI is doing is trying to replicate this not sustainable behavior, for example. So what we have to do is not looking back what AI is doing. What we have to do is look forward and see how we can change our behavior and improve our teaching for a better society.
So you have another way around to look at the impact of AI on this. I agree with you. So in this case, we might study the, like we can say, the negative consequences of AI.
It's not the negative consequences of AI. It's basically maintaining this behavior that we know we have to change. AI is looking back, it's not looking forward. And what I'm saying is we have to look forward, not looking back. Now, of course, there are some things that human beings do very incredibly good. And if we take the best of all these human beings, machines would be much better. For example, it recognizes diseases or recognizes faces or whatever. But in social human behavior, we are not doing it very well. And there we have to change. And if we leave to machines the best we have done before, that's not good for ourselves. And there we have to change and take care that the machines don't do what we have done, because this is a lot of harm.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, that's all of from my side.
That doesn't mean that technical aspects, of course, machines are perfect because they're much better than humans. But in the social aspects, don't put the machines inside, because here human beings have not done it well. And we have, as educators, we have to try to change this path, this trajectory. And that's why I showed the 2-dimension at the beginning, the technological one, which is incredible, but the social one, where we have to change. And the only way of changing it is through education.
That's correct.
We have 2 more minutes. So one
Any
last
other questions?
I don't have a question. I just want to thank you for your amazing presentation. Actually, I made use of the skills that you have just explained, especially that I have 2 little daughters, and I'll take them into consideration while teaching them. So thank you.
I'm happy. So thank you very much for inviting me, and I hope you will look now forward more than backward as AI is doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Having a good weekend.
Thank you so much, Prof.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Miguel, for the fruitful presentation. It's really inspiring, and on behalf of the organizing committee, I'd like to thank you for the time dedicated for this talk. We hope that you enjoy the conference sessions with us today. Thank you so much.
Goodbye. Thanks for the invitation, Mustafa. Bye-bye.
Prof. Miguel, thank you. Thank you. I think now we will move to the 3rd parallel sessions.
We have now 15 minutes session break. Then we will start the last session for today.
Yeah, but still, just to remind the audience that we are left with 1 keynote speaker after the 3rd parallel session. But unfortunately, the 3rd parallel session will be recorded as the keynote speaker has some commitment. He's a well-known researcher in the field, so I'm sure that you will enjoy his keynote. But let's have a break for 15 minutes, then we will come back.